Now we switch gears. وَكَأَيٍّ مِّن قَرْيَةٍ عَتَتْ عَنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّهَا وَرُسُلِهِ فَحَاسَبْنَاهَا حِسَابًا شَدِيدًا وَعَذَّبْنَاهَا عَذَابًا نُكْرًا. It's going to feel like it's a different surah. And how many villages, towns, cities have there been that disobeyed the commandment of their master and disobeyed the commandment of their messenger? So we took them to account with an intense audit, and we punished them in a way that was never even heard of before. This is what Allah said. Destruction of past nations. Where did that come from? I'm not going to tell you yet. I'll tell you by the end today. وكأي. Let's start with the first word. كأي اسم لعدد كثير لعدد كثير مبهم يفسره بما يميزه بعد. كأي means, oh my God, how many on top of many on top of many, and then it's clarified with min something. So what an enormous number of civilizations have there been, qarya have there been, towns have there been, that disobeyed the commandment of their Rabb. Can you name some of these towns that Allah mentioned? Some of them. I mean, He's saying there's a lot more than He mentioned, but some of them that He mentioned, do you know? Aad, Thamud, even Fir'aun, for example. There's these qura that were destroyed, right? And Allah talks about them, ahlaknahum, right? So let's talk now about a little bit maybe I should just tell you now. Fine, I'll just tell you. I call this the first and the last domino. So let me explain what I mean by that. You have family law, which is what we saw, a glimpse of family law. And I told you earlier on in today's discussions in the previous ayah that the bond of the man and the woman is sacred in the Quran. And actually the first bond of human beings was the bond of Adam and Hawa, was the bond of marriage, right? So it's the most sacred bond in existence between human beings. Okay. Now, having said that, because of that bond being sacred, the way you enter into it, the way a man and woman can be together needs to be sacred. And the way they end that also needs to be sacred, right? That's what we described. And as a result of that, because there's so much care put into how a man and woman come together, as a result of that, the child that is born from that relationship is also a sacred responsibility, is it not? And as a result of that, the child is also told to honor the two people that came together to bring that child into this world. And so, وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, and the relationship we have with our parents is also what? Sacred. So now, humanity is building this system, and think about a child. The first instance of shukr or tawakkul, right? Or who does a child turn to when they're scared? Like a believer turns to Allah when they're in fear, khawfan wa tam'an. But when a child has fear and a child has hope, who do they turn to? Parents. When we need rizq, we turn to Allah. When a child needs food, what does he turn to? The parents, right? When a child needs anything, who do they call? When we need something, we make dua to Allah. When a child needs something, what do they call? Allah used the parents as a training for a child whose mind isn't yet developed to eventually replace the parents with Allah. Everything the child was doing with Allah, as the child grows older, he replaces that with the parents. And that's why you notice the language, anishkur li wa liwalidik. So you don't stop thanking your parents, but you realize that the gratitude you have to your parents, behind that gratitude is your gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the way Allah taught the human being the gratitude to Allah, the first training, Allah did not, even the child is born with fitrah, it doesn't come out saying, well, alhamdulillah. It doesn't do that, right? And the first words that come out of its mouth eventually is not Allah. In our mama, baba, first words, right? You know what that means? Allah took one sacred relationship to prepare the child for the ultimate sacred relationship, which is what? The relationship with Allah. So now what I'm trying to tell you is the marriage is sacred, the child is sacred, the child coming up and learning the relationship with his parents and being grateful to his parents and her parents is sacred, and all of that eventually leads to the regard one is supposed to have for Allah Azza wa Jalla. In fact, if you know how the famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ says, "Man lam yashkur an-nas lam yashkur Allah." If you can't thank Allah, if you can't thank people, you can't thank Allah. Well, the first instance of that is if you can't even acknowledge the best behavior to your own mother who gave you birth, right? That she brought you into this world, then how are you going to thank the one who brought you into this world that you can't even see? And that's Allah. So it's only logical that you are trained with the seen to prepare you for the unseen. Now, having said all of that, from this comes an entire system of blood ties being sacred. And from this then comes this idea that the yatama are people whose sacred tie parents have been cut. So they become yatim. So what does Allah do? He says, اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها. That ayah ends with taqwa of al-arham in Surah An-Nisa. What's the immediate next statement? وَآتُوا الْيَتَامَى أَمْوَالَهُم. Give to the yatama. Why? Because now it's your sacred duty. You as a community must cover for those who don't have the shadow of that other sacred relationship, their parents. So you must go cover for them. You must help them. Now, imagine a society in which the man and the woman coming together is not sacred. They can just get together, hook up and hook off, and sink their hook somewhere else. And they can just have casual relationships. Nothing is sacred about it. Nothing. If such a society existed, I mean, you wouldn't know of such a society, but I'm saying, hypothetically, if such a society existed, then the child that comes into existence as a result of that union, is that child being treated as something sacred? No. Because the union from which he came, or she came, itself wasn't sacred. So the child is not being treated as someone sacred. And will that child see their mother or father as sacred figures to be thankful to turn to learn from, so they can eventually turn to the ultimately sacred? Will that happen? No. No, in fact, they'll talk to their mom and say, yeah, Jennifer, I'm busy right now. I'll call their mom by their first name. I don't know my dad, and if I knew him, I'd beep, beep, beep. You'd get a society where the parents are no longer sacred. Which means that, by the way, for a child who's coming up naturally, who are the most important people in the life of a child? Parents. If you remove the parents from the equation, you know what that means? There's nobody important left. If no one's around that's left, the only one that's sacred is who? No, not Allah, not for that young man. Yourself. Now you're sacred. Looking out for number one, baby. Now everyone else is a burden. The only one that matters is me. The whole universe revolves around me. Now imagine an entire society of millions of people who have removed the sacredness of the man and the woman coming together and the child becoming a sacred responsibility. What happens to such a society when you say, listen to your Rabb? They're like, Rabb? I don't even listen to my mom. I don't even listen to anybody. You know who I listen to? Me. That's who I listen to. A nation, as a nation that entirely rebels against the command of their Rabb, because they have no authority, they don't recognize any authority. Why would I listen to a messenger? Another human being? He's just human. Well, the first people you were supposed to have regard for were also human, weren't they? But you don't have that. You don't have it as a culture in that society. You don't have it. Once you remove the sacredness of family, you have prepared a society for eventual, not just kufr, but utu, and we'll discuss utu in a second. What is it? What is it? Atat an amri rabbiha. What does that mean? We'll dig into that a little bit. But what I'm saying is, the first part of this surah was the first domino that you need to keep from falling. But if you don't let that domino fall, dominoes will continue to fall until you get to the final domino, which is what? حَاسَبْنَاهَا حِسَابًا شَدِيدًا وَعَذَّبْنَاهَا عَذَابًا نُكْرًا. And all the other dominoes in between, you're too smart, you can figure that out yourself.